Now let's get into this article. You mentioned those 3 points. You had some 3 points like rebuttals in the end. So let's start with the beginning. That's that it drives up cost, right? Renewable energies drives up cost. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and our experience and kind of looking worldwide in jurisdictions that are moving their electricity grids off of coal and natural gas and other fossil fuels has been actually the opposite. And let's look at some jurisdictions. South Australia is a great example. Their electricity grid 10 years ago was almost exclusively fossil powered,
Hmm.
natural gas and coal. And since then, because they don't have a lot of domestic reserves of coal, they had to import a lot of their energy. They made a conscious decision over multiple premiers during this time to actually switch to a renewable grid. So right now, their
Hmm.
grid is 75% wind and solar, and they have a very large proportion of battery storage. And then what they've been able to do is they've been able to commit that their grid will be 100% renewable powered, and that's all
Yeah.
solar, all grid, by 2027. And it's remarkable kind of what's happened there. The other ones I would look at is, some of the US states, like Iowa is a classic example. So they went all in wind a couple of years ago. So 55% of their electricity grid is
Wow.
now powered by wind. And that's a massive share. And
Yeah.
again, their electricity costs are 25% less than the US average. Even Texas, which has a 37% solar and wind share in their electricity system, their electricity costs, again, 25% less than the US average. So you can actually do it. And even if you look here at home in Canada, look over at Alberta. There was a renewable procurement a couple of years ago in Alberta, and they got power bids coming in around 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's remarkable. And again, that's the
Yeah.
power that's produced. But if you look at the domestic Alberta electricity rate, it's almost 26 cents kilowatt hour. So the delta between what you can produce at versus what you can sell to the retail consumer at has a great opportunity to make money.
Yeah.
So there are examples all over the world. And, what I think people point to is they point to the examples that don't work, or where things have gone wrong, or where there's extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
Everybody points to Germany, going, "Oh my God, look at electricity costs in Germany." And a couple of things happen there. One is they shut down nuclear plants. Two
Yeah.
is they are based in an EU electricity market that has a lot of kind of peculiarities to it that what happens is it can drive up electricity rates. And then they also point to the war in Ukraine, where Germany had made a bet on Russian gas and they had to get off fairly quickly. So
Right.
that's kind of an example. Another one point people point to is California. Californians pay about 30 cents a kilowatt hour US for power, which is
Wow.
astronomical.
Yeah.
Compare that to the Canadian average around 15 or 16 cents Canadian, and there's quite a difference in that. And again, there's a whole bunch of structural issues kind of behind why
Yeah.
those power rates are so high. Some of them historical, and some of them more recent. The more recent ones are that they are having to rebuild their entire electricity grid because of climate change and in wildfires. So, all those costs
Ah,
get put back on the ratepayer. And
gotcha.
so, the answer at the end of the day is complicated. So, the bottom
Yeah.
line, though, is if you do it right, if you plan ahead, and if you actually have, all your facts together and everything lined up, you can build renewables into your grid, and you can save money, address affordability, you can attract industry, you can do all sorts of things right. And maybe the last thing I'll say before you kind of jump to the next question is Ontario is such an interesting study right now.
Right.
If you remember when Doug Ford came in,
Yeah.
he canceled 700 plus renewable energy contracts. And in the last 2 years, the opposite has happened. Ontario has almost two Site C's worth of battery storage procurements that are now finished.
Hmm.
They're looking at building more renewables for the grid right now. They just announced last week $10+ billion to help homeowners switch to heat pumps and
Wow.
other technologies that are going to save them money and clean up the grid. So there's so many good things happening out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny though. I live in Ontario. I haven't heard that, and I'm pretty. I follow this quite frequently. I wonder. And he's come out. Doug Ford, the premier, has come out very against renewables, saying it's cost like the costs are too high. Has it changed over his last 6 years now? I think he's on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ontario, through its utilities and its regulators, have been looking at procuring more wind power, particularly from
Yeah.
some of the northern parts of the province. The battery storage and what they've done there
It's gotten a
is
lot.
quite amazing.
Yeah.
They're bringing nuclear back online on
Yeah.
time, on budget. And in the atomic and nuclear world, that's almost unheard of to be able to do
Right.
that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, good on Ontario for
Yeah.
kind of realizing the error of their ways when they first came into power, and realizing that, hey, wait a minute, clean energy is something that a lot of foreign investment is looking for. And if
Yeah.
you look at the 50 plus $billion of kind of automotive battery plants that have been landed in Canada, most in Ontario, some in Quebec, that's all predicated on a clean grid. And if you look at these companies that have come into Ontario and rescued the automotive manufacturing
Yeah.
industry, the first thing they say is they say you've got affordable, reliable, cheap, clean power. And, the Ford administration has realized